The October rain pattered against the garage windows as I ran my cloth over the hood of my Highland Green 1967 Shelby GT500. The sound was almost musical, a perfect accompaniment to the Fleetwood Mac playing softly from my workshop speakers. This car represented everything to me, not because it was a collector's dream worth more than my annual salary, but because it was the last gift my grandfather gave me before Alzheimer's took his memories, and eventually, him. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Still babying that old thing, Becca? My husband Jason leaned against the doorframe, coffee mug in hand, watching me with that half smile I'd fallen in love with 12 years ago. It's not babying. It's called proper maintenance, I replied, stepping back to admire the gleaming paint. Your dad was just asking about it yesterday. I think he's still shocked your grandfather left it to me instead of him. Jason rolled his eyes. Dad will get over it someday. Maybe. Speaking of family, Olivia called, again. I tried not to let my expression change. My sister-in-law Olivia and I had what you might generously call a complicated relationship. Where I was practical, she was ethereal. Where I saved, she spent. Where I planned, she manifested. And where I respected boundaries, Olivia saw only suggestions. What does she want this time? I asked, carefully returning my detailing supplies to their labeled shelves. Another loan for another life-changing opportunity? Jason sighed. The weight of being the middleman between his sister and his wife, evident in the slump of his shoulders. She says she's found this healing retreat in Sedona. Something about crystal alignments and past life regression therapy. She says it's the answer to her anxiety issues. And let me guess, it costs just slightly more than she has? $8,000. But she swears this is different. The last 4 therapists couldn't help, but apparently this guru has special credentials. I turned away, focusing on organizing tools that were already perfectly arranged. Jason, we've been through this. Your sister is 34 years old. She needs to figure out her own finances. The last investment we helped with was that organic mushroom coffee business that never produced a single bag of coffee. I know, but Mom and Dad are considering helping her, Jason said, his voice dropping slightly. Dad mentioned something about the retirement fund. That made me turn around. They can't keep enabling her. Your mom just retired from teaching, and your dad's pension will only stretch so far. Jason nodded, looking tired. I tried telling them that. But you know how they are with Olivia. Ever since her divorce, I understood, even if I disagreed. After Olivia's marriage imploded 3 years ago, the Chen family had closed ranks around her. Every setback was met with support, which would have been admirable if it hadn't crossed into coddling. Meanwhile, my practical suggestions about budgeting and therapy were dismissed as unsympathetic. I'll talk to your mom tomorrow, I promised, locking up the garage. Maybe she can talk some sense into your dad. That retirement fund needs to last them 20 more years, not fund another of Olivia's journeys. The next day, I took lunch at Emma and Lawrence Chen's tidy bungalow in the older part of Portland. Emma had prepared dumplings, her comfort food and peace offering rolled into one. These are delicious, Emma, I said, accepting a second helping. At 68, my mother-in-law maintained the energy of someone 20 years younger, her silver-streaked black hair always impeccably styled, her home always welcoming. Family recipe, she said, beaming. Now, what's on your mind? Jason mentioned you wanted to talk. I set down my chopsticks carefully. It's about Olivia's new retreat. Jason mentioned that you and Lawrence are thinking of using retirement money to fund it? Emma's smile dimmed slightly. Lawrence wants to help her. You know how he worries. I do know. And I understand wanting to support Olivia, but this is the 5th solution in 2 years. I leaned forward, trying to find the right words. Emma, you and Lawrence worked too hard for too long to risk your security on something with no guarantees. What would you have us do? Ignore her when she's in pain? There was an edge to Emma's voice now, the protectiveness that always emerged when Olivia was the subject. Not at all. But maybe help her find a licensed therapist who takes insurance, or help her develop a savings plan so she can pay for these things herself. Take the Shelby, follow the map, find whatever lies at the end of this 50-year-old treasure hunt. Not for any material gain. Matthew assures me there's no actual gold involved, but for the sake of laying to rest an unfulfilled promise. And, perhaps in doing so, you'll create a new legacy for the Shelby, one that honors both its past and its future. Lawrence stared at the map in disbelief. Dad never mentioned any of this. A treasure hunt? A cross-country trip he planned with Mom? Some memories are too precious, too painful to share casually, Dr. Wilson observed. Andrew spoke of it to me only in his final years, when the Alzheimer's made him more reflective about life's missed opportunities. I carefully refolded the letter, processing its unexpected request. So Grandpa Andrew wants me to take the Shelby on this journey, following a 50-year-old map to complete an adventure he and Catherine never got to finish. Not just you. Dr. Wilson corrected gently. Read the last paragraph. I unfolded the letter again, finding the final lines I hadn't yet read aloud. This journey isn't meant to be solitary. The greatest adventures are those shared with those we love. I hope you'll consider including the family, Lawrence, who never knew his mother's adventurous spirit, Emma, who has kept the family anchored through storms, Jason, who has your heart, and Olivia, who is still searching for her path. Together, perhaps you can create something healing from these fragments of the past, something that bridges the divisions I fear may follow my departure. A hushed silence fell over our small group as the implications of Grandpa Andrew's final request sank in. He hadn't just left me his cherished car. He'd crafted a final family mission, a journey designed to bring us together after his death. He knew, Emma said softly. Somehow, despite his illness, he knew there would be conflict over the car. And he created a solution that goes beyond simple ownership, Jason added. A shared purpose that transforms the Shelby from an object of division into a vehicle for connection. Lawrence examined the map with newfound interest. This route crosses through 7 states, following back roads rather than main highways. It would take at least 2 weeks to complete. 2 weeks in the Shelby together? Olivia looked simultaneously intrigued and apprehensive. That would be intense, especially given recent events, I acknowledged, the memory of the car theft still fresh, despite the progress we'd made since. Dr. Wilson observed our reactions with thoughtful attention. Andrew didn't expect this journey to be easy, but he believed it would be worthwhile. A chance to forge new memories with the Shelby while honoring its history. I traced the route on the aging map, noting familiar landmarks and mysterious annotations in Grandpa Andrew's handwriting. Catherine's. View. Midnight jazz. Where time stops. Cryptic references to experiences planned but never realized. What do you think, Becca? Jason asked, his expression open and supportive. Is this something you'd want to do? The question hung in the air, weighted with significance beyond a simple road trip. This was about how we moved forward as a family, about whether we could truly transform the painful episode of the car theft into something constructive and healing. I looked from the map to the gleaming Shelby, then to each member of the Chen family, noting the tentative hope in their expressions. Over the past weeks, we'd begun the difficult work of addressing long-standing family dynamics, of establishing healthier patterns. This journey that Grandpa Andrew had envisioned could be the next step in that process. Challenging, certainly, but potentially transformative. I think, I said slowly, that Grandpa Andrew's final gift wasn't just the Shelby. It was this opportunity to write a new chapter together. So you'll do it? Olivia asked, Lead this family treasure hunt? I nodded, a sense of rightness settling over me. Yes, but not as the leader, as a partner. This is something we need to plan and experience together, as equals. Lawrence extended his hand toward me, a gesture both formal and deeply meaningful, coming from a man who had struggled to accept my place in the family hierarchy. Partners, then, to honor Dad's memory and Mom's missed adventure. As we returned to the gala, the Shelby seemed to gleam with new significance under the venue's elegant lighting. It was no longer just a classic car, no longer just a point of contention or even a cherished inheritance. It had become a vessel for our family's next chapter, a tangible link between past and future. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I felt a subtle click, and the false bottom of the storage compartment shifted slightly. Now lift from the front edge, Dr. Wilson instructed. As I did so, the false bottom hinged upward, revealing a hidden space beneath. Inside lay a small, leather-bound box and an envelope yellowed with age, both bearing my name and Grandpa Andrew's distinctive handwriting. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted them out. The Chen family gathered closer, their curiosity palpable in the hushed atmosphere. Even Dr. Wilson seemed to be holding his breath as I carefully opened the envelope first, unfolding a letter written in Grandpa Andrew's increasingly unsteady script. "Dear Rebecca," I read aloud, my voice catching slightly on the familiar salutation. "If you're reading this, then several things have transpired as I hoped. First, my Shelby has found its way to you, the person who truly understands its spirit. Second, you have proven yourself worthy of its legacy by protecting it when challenged, as I suspect you might be. And third, Matthew has judged the time right to reveal this final piece of our shared story." I glanced up at Dr. Wilson, who nodded encouragement to continue. "The box contains something I've safeguarded for nearly 50 years, I continued reading. Something that represents both, my greatest adventure and my deepest regret. I entrust it to you now, not just for safekeeping, but for completion. The journey I began, but never finished, deserves an ending. You'll understand when you see what's inside." Lawrence shifted impatiently. "What's in the box, Rebecca?" With careful fingers, I opened the leather case. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, lay an antique compass with a cracked face, a tarnished brass key unlike any car key I'd ever seen, and a hand-drawn map on aging parchment paper. "What on earth?" Emma murmured, peering over my shoulder. I returned to the letter, continuing where I'd left off. The summer of 1969, just 2 years after Catherine and I purchased the Shelby, we planned a cross-country adventure. Not just any road trip, but a treasure hunt of sorts. Matthew will remember, he helped design the clues, back when we were young and thought adventure was life's greatest purpose. Dr. Wilson smiled at the memory. We were inspired by an old legend about a gold prospector who supposedly hid his fortune somewhere in the Rocky Mountains. Complete nonsense, of course. But it gave us an excuse to create an elaborate puzzle for Andrew and Catherine to solve during their honeymoon trip. But we never completed it, I read from the letter. 3 days into our journey, we received news that Catherine's mother had suffered a stroke. We returned home immediately, intending to resume our adventure once family matters were settled. But life intervened, as it often does. Children came, careers demanded attention, and our grand treasure hunt was set aside for someday. I looked up from the letter, meeting Dr. Wilson's gaze. "This is about a road trip they never took?" "Not just a road trip," he clarified. "A journey Andrew regretted postponing until it was too late. Catherine died of cancer when Lawrence was just 12. The adventure they'd planned remained an unfulfilled promise." I returned to the letter, Grandpa Andrew's words taking on new poignancy with this context. "Catherine never got her adventure," I read, emotion thickening my voice. And as the years passed, the map and compass became painful reminders of what we'd postponed until it was too late. But I couldn't bring myself to discard them. These symbols of youthful optimism and deferred dreams. Instead, I hid them in the one place that connected me to both Catherine and that hopeful time, the Shelby. Olivia wiped away a tear. That's why the car meant so much to him. It wasn't just about the vehicle itself. It was his connection to Grandma Catherine, Jason agreed softly. I continued reading. Rebecca, I've observed your spirit over the years we've spent together working on the Shelby. You understand that cars aren't just machines. They're vessels for journeys, for memories, for possibilities. That's why I'm entrusting you with not just the Shelby, but with these artifacts of an adventure unlived. The next words caught in my throat momentarily. My final wish is this: complete the journey Catherine and I never finished. Dr. Wilson smiled, a blend of nostalgia and mischief in his expression. Andrew Chen was my oldest friend, but he was also a man who understood the value of a good story. He wanted his legacy to unfold like chapters in a book, revealing itself, over time, to the right reader. And I'm the right reader? I asked. Indisputably. Your response to the theft of the Shelby confirmed what Andrew always believed about you, that you understood the car's true worth beyond its monetary value. That you would fight for it not out of greed, but out of respect for what it represented. Of course I did, I said, somewhat bewildered. It was Grandpa Andrew's car, our connection. But what does that have to do with this secret you're talking about? Dr. Wilson leaned forward, lowering his voice slightly. The Shelby isn't just a cherished family heirloom or a valuable classic car. It contains something Andrew placed there for safekeeping, something he wanted to ensure went to the person who truly appreciated the vehicle for the right reasons. My heart quickened with anticipation. What did he hide in the car? That, Dr. Wilson said, rising to his feet, is something I think you should discover for yourself, with your family present. After all, Andrew's legacy belongs to all of you, even if the car itself was meant specifically for you. As bewildering as his cryptic approach was, I felt a surge of excitement at the prospect of one final connection to Grandpa Andrew. One last message from beyond the years that had taken him from us. I gathered Jason, Lawrence, Emma, and Olivia, explaining Dr. Wilson's mysterious hint as we followed him back to the Shelby display. The crowd had thinned considerably by now, most guests having moved to the adjacent ballroom where a live band was playing. We had the atrium largely to ourselves as Dr. Wilson led us to stand beside the Highland Green Shelby that had become so central to our family's recent journey. Andrew prepared this car as a time capsule of sorts, Dr. Wilson explained to the assembled Chen family. A repository not just of automotive history, but of personal legacy. Rebecca, as the person he chose to inherit the Shelby, would you like to discover what he left for you? I looked at the gleaming vehicle, suddenly seeing it with new eyes. Not just a car, not just a symbol, but a vessel carrying one final message from a man who had known his mind would fail him, but had found a way to extend his influence beyond that cruel fate. Yes, I said firmly. Show me. Dr. Wilson gestured toward the Shelby's gleaming dashboard. Andrew installed a hidden compartment beneath the center console, something he added during one of your restoration sessions together. Do you remember it? I searched my memory, recalling the countless hours spent working on the car with Grandpa Andrew. The custom storage box? I thought that was just for extra tools and registration papers. That's what he wanted everyone to think. Dr. Wilson's eyes twinkled with something like mischief. But there's a false bottom, accessible only if you know exactly how to release the mechanism. 5 pairs of eyes focused intently on me as I approached the driver's side door. With reverent care, I slid into the familiar leather seat, the scent of aged upholstery and lingering traces of Old Spice aftershave enveloping me like an embrace. My fingers found the center console latch, releasing it with a practiced motion. "The visible compartment is just the beginning," Dr. Wilson explained, leaning in through the open door. "Andrew showed me how to access the hidden section during one of his lucid periods. He wanted to ensure someone knew in case—" He didn't need to finish the thought. In case his mind failed completely before he could pass on the secret. "How do I open it?" I asked, examining the seemingly ordinary storage box. "There's a sequence," Dr. Wilson said. "Press down on the left back corner while simultaneously sliding the right panel toward the passenger seat." With careful precision, I followed his instructions. The display tells Andrew's story beautifully, both his struggle with Alzheimer's and his passion for this remarkable vehicle. As the transport team completed their work, a staff member approached Dr. Wilson with an urgent question about the evening schedule. He excused himself, leaving Jason and me to make final adjustments to the display. I was carefully arranging the original key and the framed photograph of young Andrew and Catherine with their new Shelby when Lawrence and Emma arrived, followed shortly by Olivia. "This is wonderful, Rebecca," Emma said, taking in the display with evident emotion. "You've captured Andrew's spirit perfectly." Lawrence stood silently before the panels featuring his father's journal entries, reading them with careful attention. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with suppressed feeling. "I never knew Dad felt this way about the car. About why he left it to you." He turned to me, his expression more vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. "I always thought it was a rejection of some kind, or confusion from his illness. But it was deliberate. He saw in you something he valued deeply." "A kindred spirit," I suggested gently. "Someone who understood what the car meant to him beyond its monetary value." Lawrence nodded slowly. "I wish I'd understood that sooner. Before—" He trailed off, unwilling to directly reference the theft. "We're understanding it now," I said. "That's what matters." Dr. Wilson returned then, accompanied by a professional photographer who wanted to capture images of the display before guests began arriving. As we stepped aside to give them room to work, Dr. Wilson pulled me aside. "Rebecca, there's something I've been meaning to discuss with you," he said, his tone suggesting importance. "About Andrew's Shelby. There's more to the story than you might realize. Something Andrew asked me to share with whoever inherited the car, but only after they had proven themselves worthy of the responsibility." I stared at him, startled by this unexpected development. "What do you mean?" "Not here," he said, glancing around at the increasing activity in the atrium. "During a quieter moment this evening. It's something Andrew wanted handled discreetly." Before I could press for more information, he was called away again, leaving me with a swirl of questions. What more could there be to know about the Shelby? What test of worthiness had I passed in Dr. Wilson's estimation? The gala itself was a glittering success. Elegantly dressed donors mingled with medical researchers and Alzheimer's advocates, the atmosphere both festive and purposeful. The Shelby drew consistent admiration, with many guests pausing to read Andrew's story and examine the vintage photographs. Throughout the evening, I found myself watching Dr. Wilson, wondering about the revelation he had promised. He moved through the crowd with easy confidence, clearly in his element among Portland's medical and philanthropic elite. Several times he caught my gaze across the room, offering a small nod that seemed to say, "Soon." It wasn't until the formal dinner concluded and the event shifted to a more relaxed reception that Dr. Wilson finally approached me, gesturing toward a quiet corner away from the main crowd. "Now we can talk," he said, leading me to a small seating area partially screened by decorative plantings. "About Andrew's final secret." "You're being very mysterious," I observed, curiosity mingled with a touch of impatience. "What is this about?" "About tomorrow. About everything that's happened since your parents took the Shelby." Jason nodded understanding. "It's been a hell of a ride, hasn't it?" and I don't just mean the car. The observation coaxed a smile from me. That's one way to put it. Are you ready for tomorrow? He asked, leaning against the workbench. I think so. The car's perfect. The display materials are ready. I've even found a dress that complements the Shelby's Highland Green, Jason chuckled. Only you would coordinate your outfit with your car. It's an important detail, I protested with mock indignation. Everything needs to work together visually. The architect in you never rests. His smile faded slightly as he studied my face. But that's not really what's keeping you up, is it? I sighed, knowing he could read me too well after 12 years of marriage. I keep thinking about what comes after the gala. We've all been focused on this event, united by the common goal of honoring Grandpa Andrew. But when it's over, what then? Do we slide back into old patterns? Does the progress we've made evaporate once the immediate crisis has passed? Jason considered the question seriously. I don't think so. At least, not entirely. Something fundamental has shifted, Becca. I see it in Olivia's commitment to her treatment program, in Dad's willingness to keep attending therapy even when it's uncomfortable, in Mom's efforts to stop mediating every conflict. And in us, too. We're communicating more honestly than we have in years. But what if, I began, what if it doesn't last? Jason finished for me. Then we address it. We keep working at it. Family isn't a destination. It's a journey. Isn't that what Dr. Rivera keeps telling us? I smiled despite myself, using the therapist's words against me. That's fighting dirty. Whatever works. Jason wrapped an arm around my shoulders. Come back to bed. Tomorrow's a big day, and you need some rest. As we turned to leave, I paused for one last look at the Shelby, gleaming under the soft light. Tomorrow it would help raise money for Alzheimer's research, honoring the man who had entrusted it to me and potentially helping others facing the same disease that had taken him from us. It seemed a fitting tribute to Grandpa Andrew's legacy. What I couldn't have known then was that the gala would bring one final revelation, a secret hidden within the Shelby itself that would complete the puzzle of why Andrew Chen had been so adamant about who should inherit his cherished car. The morning of the gala dawned clear and bright, a perfect Portland spring day. The transportation company arrived precisely on schedule to load the Shelby onto a specialized trailer designed for valuable vintage cars. I hovered anxiously as they secured it, double-checking every strap and cushion. Ma'am, we do this for million-dollar vehicles all the time, the lead technician assured me with a patient smile. Your Shelby is in good hands. I know, I acknowledged, slightly embarrassed by my hovering. It's just special. They all are, he agreed, understanding in his eyes. To the right person, a car is never just a car. Jason and I followed the transport vehicle to the gala venue, an elegant glass and steel event center overlooking the river. Dr. Wilson met us in the parking area, dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit that emphasized his distinguished appearance. Rebecca, Jason, thank you for arriving early, he greeted us warmly. We have the Shelby's display area ready, and your memorial materials have been set up exactly as requested. We followed him inside to a spacious atrium already bustling with staff making final preparations for the evening's event. In a place of honor near the center of the room, a platform had been prepared for the Shelby, surrounded by elegantly designed panels featuring the photos and journal excerpts we'd selected. It looks perfect, I breathed, taking in the display, as the transport team carefully maneuvered the Shelby into position. Your design background shows, Dr. Wilson observed approvingly. Close isn't the same as healthy, Dr. Rivera countered calmly. From what you've described, the closeness in your family has often come at the expense of individual autonomy and honest expression of feelings. It was a challenging session with moments of defensiveness and tension, but also surprising vulnerability. Emma spoke about her fear of family conflict that had led her to enable harmful patterns, rather than address them directly. Lawrence acknowledged his difficulty accepting that his father had chosen to leave the Shelby to me, a non-blood relative, rather than to him or Jason. I felt passed over, he admitted reluctantly, as though Dad didn't trust me with something that mattered to him. Did you ever talk to your father about the car? Dr. Rivera asked. About what it meant to him? Lawrence looked down at his hands. Not really. Cars were never my interest. I was focused on the business, on practical matters. Perhaps the car went to Rebecca precisely because she did have those conversations with your father, Dr. Rivera suggested gently. Not as a rejection of you, but as a recognition of the particular connection they shared. By the end of the session, no magical transformation had occurred, but something had shifted. We'd begun to name the dynamics that had plagued the family for years, to acknowledge the patterns that had culminated in the theft of the Shelby. It was a start. As the gala approached, I spent increasingly more time with the Shelby, ensuring it was in perfect condition for the event. One evening, as I was polishing its chrome details, Megan stopped by to see the progress on the display materials we'd been designing together, elegant informational panels that would accompany the car and Andrew's memorabilia. This is really coming together, she remarked, reviewing the design mock-up spread across my workbench. The story of your grandfather-in-law, his friendship with Dr. Wilson, his journey with Alzheimer's. It's powerful stuff, especially with excerpts from his journals. It feels right, I agreed, stepping back to survey our work, honoring not just the car but the man who loved it, making something meaningful out of what started as a terrible violation. Megan gave me a sideways glance. And how are things with the family? Any backsliding after the initial crisis passed? Surprisingly, no. The therapy sessions are tough. Last week, Lawrence actually walked out halfway through, but everyone keeps coming back. And Olivia, I shook my head in continued amazement. She's 3 weeks into her treatment program and actually sticking with it. Got a second job waiting tables to supplement her income since she's refused further financial support from her parents. Wow. Megan looked genuinely impressed. That's a major turnaround. It is, though I'm still cautious about getting too optimistic. Old patterns have a way of reasserting themselves under stress. Megan nodded, understanding. Speaking of stress, are you nervous about the gala? It's a high-profile event from what you've said. A little, I admitted. Dr. Wilson mentioned there will be press coverage, major donors, medical researchers. Not my usual crowd. You'll be fine, Megan assured me. Just focus on what matters, honoring Andrew and supporting research that might help others facing the same battle he did. The night before the gala, I couldn't sleep. After tossing and turning for an hour, I slipped out of bed, pulled on a robe, and padded down to the garage. The Shelby waited in the darkness, its silhouette familiar and comforting. I switched on a single lamp, casting a warm glow over the vehicle that had become so central to our family's recent journey. Tomorrow, it would be the centerpiece of a prestigious charity event, admired by strangers who would never understand all it represented. Not just a classic car, but a complex web of family relationships, painful growth, and tentative healing. I ran my hand along its flank, the cool metal grounding me in reality. Couldn't sleep either? Jason's voice came from the doorway, making me start slightly. Too many thoughts, I explained as he joined me beside the car. He saw it as a status symbol, a collector's item. You saw it the way Grandpa did, as something alive, with a history and a spirit. The validation from such an unexpected source, Olivia, who had previously been jealous of my connection with her grandfather, felt like the closing of a circle somehow. We continued through the journals, finding more passages about the Shelby, about Dr. Wilson's research program, about Grandpa Andrew's hopes for his family after he was gone. In one particularly poignant entry, he wrote about his concerns for Olivia, recognizing her struggle to find purpose and stability, concerns that proved tragically prescient in the years following his death. I worry about Olivia. Olivia read, her voice barely above a whisper. She's searching for something, but looking in all the wrong places. Lawrence and Emma indulge her too much, trying to make up for their own rigidity in other areas. What she needs isn't more freedom but more guidance, not control, but mentorship. I won't be here to provide it. I hope someone will. She looked up at me, eyes shining with tears. He saw it all. Even then. The patterns, the enabling, everything. That led to where we are now. I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. He was a very observant man, even as his memory was failing. And I proved him right, Olivia said bitterly, flitting from one thing to another, never committing, using Mom and Dad's support as a crutch instead of a stepping stone. But you're changing that now, I reminded her. Getting real help, taking responsibility. He would be proud of that. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Jason, returning from his morning run. He paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. The scattered journals, Olivia's tear-streaked face, my hand covering hers across the table. "Did I miss something important?" he asked cautiously. "Just discovering that your grandfather was even wiser than we gave him credit for," I explained, withdrawing my hand. "These journals are incredible, Jason. They're going to make the gala display so much more meaningful." Over the next several weeks, preparations for Dr. Wilson's fundraising gala intensified. I coordinated with his staff about the logistics of transporting and securing the Shelby, while also working with the Chen family to create the memorial display. True to her word, Olivia brought the journals, allowing us to select passages that captured Andrew Chen's spirit and his journey with Alzheimer's. Emma contributed photographs I'd never seen before. Andrew and Catherine with the brand new Shelby, Andrew teaching a young Lawrence to check the oil, Andrew and Dr. Wilson at their college graduation. Lawrence, meanwhile, seemed to be processing his own complicated feelings about his father's legacy. One evening, he arrived at our house unexpected, carrying a cardboard box. "I found these in the attic," he explained as Jason invited him in. "Dad's tools, the ones he used when working on the Shelby. I thought maybe you might want them for your garage, Rebecca. They should stay with the car." The gesture, small, but meaningful, suggested that Lawrence was finally beginning to accept his father's decision to leave me the Shelby. When I opened the box to find meticulously maintained tools, some dating back to the 1960s, I felt another piece of the family puzzle falling into place. Our first family therapy session took place 2 weeks before the gala. The therapist, Dr. Rivera, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who specialized in family dynamics and inheritance disputes. She made it clear from the outset that healing would require honesty from all parties, even when that honesty was uncomfortable. "What I'm hearing," she said after our initial explanations about the car theft and its aftermath, "is a family system where boundaries have been routinely violated, resentments have festered beneath the surface, and communication has been indirect, at best. The incident with the car didn't create these problems. It merely exposed them." Lawrence shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "That seems rather simplistic. Our family has always been close." "These are Grandpa's journals," she said, placing the satchel carefully on our dining table. "There are 7 of them, covering the period from his initial diagnosis until about 6 months before he died, when the writing became too difficult for him." I opened the satchel reverently, finding inside a collection of bound notebooks, each labeled with dates in Andrew Chen's precise handwriting. The sight of it, so familiar from birthday cards and Christmas tags over the years, brought an unexpected lump to my throat. "I've never read them all the way through," Olivia admitted as I removed the first journal. "I started to once, but it felt too overwhelming. All those memories slipping away from him, documented in his own hand." I nodded in understanding. Bearing witness to someone's cognitive decline was difficult enough. Reading their own account of it would be heart-wrenching. "Maybe we should read them together," I suggested, setting the journal on the table between us. It might be easier that way. Olivia's relief was palpable. I'd like that. For the next several hours, we pored over Andrew Chen's journals, taking turns reading passages aloud. The early entries were remarkably lucid, detailed accounts of his life, stories from his youth, reflections on his marriage and career. As the journals progressed, the handwriting became less steady, the narratives less linear, sometimes repeating or trailing off mid-thought. But throughout all the journals, one subject appeared consistently: the Shelby. I took the Mustang out today, I read from the third journal, dated about a year after his diagnosis. Drove along the coast highway, windows down, feeling young. Again. These moments of clarity are precious now. Behind the wheel, everything makes sense for a little while. The doctor says I should stop driving soon, but I'm not ready yet. Not while I still remember the way. Olivia wiped away a tear. He loved that car so much. It wasn't just the car, I realized, flipping through more entries. It was what it represented to him. Freedom, control, connection to his younger self. As we continued reading, a clearer picture of Andrew Chen emerged, not just the dignified patriarch I'd known in his final years, but a complex man with passions, regrets, and a fierce determination to preserve his autonomy, even as his mind betrayed him. Listen to this, Olivia said, reading from the fifth journal. Matthew visited today, brought pictures from college that sparked memories I thought I'd lost. He's working on new treatments that won't help me, but might help others someday. I've decided to participate in his study. Not for myself, it's too late for that, but for future generations. If my failing mind can provide any insights, then some good will come from this cruel disease. That sounds like the grandpa I knew, I said softly. Always thinking of others, even when facing his own struggles. Olivia nodded, turning the page. Oh, she exclaimed suddenly. Becca, look at this. She pushed the journal toward me, pointing to a passage written in increasingly shaky handwriting. Decided today what will happen to the Shelby, I read aloud. Lawrence expects it, of course, his birthright as he sees it. But Lawrence never understood that car, never felt its soul. Jason appreciates it, but doesn't love it the way it deserves. But Rebecca, she sees beneath the surface. When we work, on the engine together, I see in her eyes the same joy I felt when Catherine and I first drove it home. The Shelby will go to Rebecca. Lawrence won't understand, but perhaps someday he'll see that legacy isn't about bloodlines, but about passion. I set the journal down, momentarily overcome. Here was confirmation, in Grandpa Andrew's own words, of what I'd always believed but sometimes doubted during family tensions, that he had genuinely wanted me to have the Shelby, not out of some arbitrary decision or confusion caused by his illness, but because he recognized a kindred spirit. He was right, Olivia said quietly, about all of it. Dad never understood the car the way you do. I want to restore the original key and have the photograph professionally preserved and framed, I explained to the attentive Chen family gathered in our living room. Then I'd like to create a display for both at Dr. Wilson's gala alongside the Shelby, not just showcasing the car, but telling Grandpa Andrew's story, his college friendship with Dr. Wilson, his struggle with Alzheimer's, his participation in the research program, making it personal. Lawrence nodded slowly, emotion flickering across his usually stoic features. Dad would have appreciated that. He never wanted recognition for himself, but he believed deeply in supporting medical research. And I think it would be meaningful if we all contributed something to the display, I continued. Photos, memories, stories that show who Andrew Chen was beyond his diagnosis. A celebration of his whole life, not just his final chapter. That's a beautiful idea, Becca, Emma said, her eyes glistening. I have several albums from the early years of our marriage, when Lawrence's parents would visit. There might be more photos of Andrew with the Shelby. As we discussed the possibilities, for the memorial display, the atmosphere in the room shifted subtly. The tension that had dominated the evening began to dissipate, replaced by a collaborative energy I hadn't felt with my in-laws in years, perhaps ever. For the first time, we were united by a common purpose that transcended old resentments and family dynamics. "I might have something to contribute as well," Olivia said hesitantly. Grandpa kept journals. When he was first diagnosed, he started writing down memories, afraid he'd lose them. He gave them to me to keep safe. I stared at her in surprise. "He kept journals? You never mentioned them." A flush crept up Olivia's neck. "I know. It was another thing I kept to myself, like the key. I think I was hoarding pieces of him, trying to claim some special connection since you had the car." She looked down, fingers twisting together in her lap. It wasn't right. The journals belonged to all of us. "Would you be willing to share excerpts for the display?" I asked, carefully keeping any hint of accusation from my tone. Olivia nodded. "I'll bring them over this weekend. We can go through them together if you'd like." The offer of collaboration, of sharing something she'd kept private for years, felt like another small but significant breakthrough. As the evening concluded and goodbyes were exchanged, I found myself experiencing an emotion I hadn't expected: cautious hope. Not just for the success of the gala display, but for the possibility of a healthier family dynamic moving forward. After the Chen family departed, Jason helped me finish cleaning up, a contemplative silence between us as we loaded the last dishes into the dishwasher. "That went better than expected," he observed finally, wiping down the countertop. "It did." I agreed, still somewhat surprised by the fact. Though I'm reserving judgment until we've actually made it through a few therapy sessions. Good intentions in the aftermath of a crisis are one thing, sustained change is another. Jason smiled, faintly, always the pragmatist. But I saw something different tonight, especially in Olivia. She seemed present, engaged, not just performing remorse to get what she wants. I noticed that too. I leaned against the refrigerator, considering. She told me something in the kitchen when we were clearing dishes. She's planning to refuse further financial support from your parents. Got a job to support herself through the treatment program. Jason's eyebrows shot up. Seriously? That doesn't sound like Livy at all. I know. That's why I'm cautiously optimistic it might be real change this time. I pushed off from the refrigerator, suddenly tired. But we've got a lot of work ahead if we're going to pull this gala display together in time. And then there's the family. Therapy to organize. One day at a time, Jason reminded me gently. Tonight was a good start. The following Saturday, Olivia arrived at our house carrying a weathered leather satchel. Her typically flamboyant style was subdued again. Jeans, a simple blouse, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. The change in her appearance was subtle, but noticeable, as though she were shedding an elaborate costume she'd worn for years. The complexity of his character, containing both responsibility and rebellion, seemed suddenly significant in a family struggling with those very tensions. When dinner concluded, Olivia helped me clear the plates while Jason made coffee. In knowing the relative privacy of the kitchen, she spoke in a low voice so her parents couldn't overhear. "I need to tell you something else," she said, rinsing a plate with unusual thoroughness. "Something I haven't told Mom and Dad yet." I paused in loading the dishwasher, wary of yet another revelation. "What is it?" "I've decided not to take any more financial support from them," Olivia said, her focus on the dishes unwavering. "I got a job, nothing glamorous. Just admin work at a wellness center near the treatment program. Between that and my savings from the divorce settlement, I can support myself through recovery. It's time I actually stood on my own." The declaration was so unexpected I nearly dropped the casserole dish I was holding. "Olivia, that's huge. Have you thought it through?" She nodded, finally looking up at me. "For years I've been trying. to fix myself by running away, to retreats, to quick-fix programs, to anywhere but the reality of my life. I've used Mom and Dad's money to fund the escapes, because it was easier than facing what's actually broken in me. Her voice hitched slightly. But watching what they were willing to do for me, stealing your car, risking legal consequences, it was like seeing my own selfishness reflected back at me. I can't keep doing that to them, or to myself. I studied my sister-in-law's face, searching for signs of the manipulation I'd grown accustomed to detecting. But all I saw was exhaustion, determination, and something that looked remarkably like hope. They won't make it easy for you, I warned. They're used to being needed. I know, Olivia agreed ruefully. That's why I haven't told them yet. I thought maybe you could help me figure out how. You've always been better at setting boundaries with them than I have. The request for help, genuine, humble, without emotional leverage, was perhaps the strongest evidence yet that something had fundamentally shifted in Olivia. For the first time since I'd known her, she was asking not for financial support or emotional coddling, but for guidance on becoming more independent. We'll figure it out together, I promised, surprising myself with the sincerity of the offer. Maybe we can talk about it in one of the family therapy sessions. Olivia's smile was small but genuine. I'd like that. As we returned to the dining room with coffee and the apple crisp Jason had prepared for dessert, I found myself observing the Chen family with new eyes. Lawrence, whose authoritative demeanor had always intimidated me slightly, now appeared vulnerable in his efforts to make amends. Emma, typically the family mediator who smoothed over conflicts without addressing their roots, seemed more willing to acknowledge difficult truths. And Olivia, whose self-absorption had driven so much family dysfunction, was showing the first, real signs of maturity and self-awareness I'd witnessed in 15 years of knowing her. People can surprise you, Megan had said. The Chen family was certainly proving her right. After dessert, as the evening drew to a close, I excused myself, briefly to retrieve something from the garage. When I returned, I was carrying the original Shelby key and the photograph Olivia had returned to me. I've been thinking about what to do with these, I said, placing them on the coffee table where everyone could see. And I've made a decision. I hope you'll all support. 4 pairs of eyes watched me intently as I outlined my plan, a plan that had come to me gradually throughout the evening, a way to honor Grandpa Andrew's legacy while helping the family move forward. What none of us could have anticipated was how this decision would become the cornerstone of a transformed family dynamic, or how the upcoming gala would bring revelations about Grandpa Andrew that would challenge everything we thought we knew about him, his cherished Shelby, and his final wishes for the family he left behind. That's why I wanted to come tonight, even though I was terrified you wouldn't want me here, to let you know I'm actually getting real help this time. I opened the bag cautiously, finding inside a framed certificate of enrollment in a structured, outpatient program at the same medical center where Dr. Wilson worked. He offered me a partial scholarship because of Grandpa's participation in their Alzheimer's research, Olivia explained. It's not a quick fix or a magical solution. It's 20 hours a week of actual work. Cognitive behavioral therapy, Group E. Sessions. Life skills training. And I've committed to it for at least 6 months. The revelation stunned me into momentary silence. Of all the possible outcomes of the car theft, Olivia pursuing legitimate treatment hadn't even made my list of possibilities. That's wonderful, Olivia, I managed finally. A really positive step. Part of what made me decide to do it was something Dr. Wilson said after you left, she continued, addressing me directly. He asked me what I thought Grandpa Andrew would want for his family now, not just for his car or his material possessions, but for the people he loved. And I realized he'd be heartbroken to see what we've become, how Dad and I have clung to resentment over the car, how Mom and Dad have enabled my worst tendencies, how I've used everyone's love as a crutch instead of motivation to actually get better. Her honesty left me speechless. This wasn't the Olivia I'd known for 15 years, the master of deflection and emotional manipulation. This was someone new, or perhaps someone who had been buried beneath layers of dysfunction for too long. Dr. Wilson seems to have had quite an impact on all of us, I observed, trying to process this unexpected turn. Actually, Lawrence interjected hesitantly, there's something about Dr. Wilson that we haven't told you yet. Something that might explain his particular interest in our family situation. Emma reached for her husband's hand, a silent gesture of support. Dr. Wilson was more than just the physician overseeing Dad's experimental treatment, Lawrence continued. He was Dad's roommate in college. They maintained a friendship for decades, though they'd lost touch somewhat until Dad's diagnosis brought them back into contact. Wait. Jason leaned forward, confusion evident in his expression. Dr. Wilson was Grandpa's friend? Why wouldn't he mention that when we met? Because Dad asked him not to, Lawrence explained. Dad was a proud man, as you know. When he learned his diagnosis, he reached out to Matthew, Dr. Wilson, who was already doing pioneering work in Alzheimer's research. Dad agreed to participate in the experimental treatment, but he made Matthew promise to keep their personal connection private. He didn't want special treatment or pity. And when Dad died, Lawrence continued, his voice thickening slightly, Matthew respected his wishes by maintaining his distance from the family. It wasn't until the Shelby came on his radar that he found a way to reconnect without breaking his promise. The revelation added yet another layer to an already complex situation. So Dr. Wilson buying the car wasn't just about being a collector, I said slowly. It was about reclaiming a connection to his old friend. Precisely, Emma confirmed, though he certainly didn't expect to be purchasing it under such controversial circumstances. An awkward chuckle rippled around the table, the tension beginning to dissolve into something approaching normal family dinner conversation. As we ate, Lawrence began sharing stories about Grandpa Andrew and Dr. Wilson's college days, tales I'd never heard before, glimpses of a younger, carefree Andrew Chen that contrasted sharply with the serious, sometimes stern man I'd known. They once borrowed the college president's car for a joyride, Lawrence recalled, a rare smile softening his features. Dad never admitted it, but Matthew told me they returned it with the radio permanently tuned to a classical music station. The president was apparently furious, but could never prove who did it. So, Grandpa had a rebellious streak, Jason laughed. I never would have guessed. More than a streak, Lawrence acknowledged. According to Matthew, Dad was the daredevil of their friend group. The Shelby wasn't just a car to him. It was a symbol of that free-spirited youth, even as he became the responsible family patriarch we all knew. As Lawrence spoke, I found myself reevaluating my understanding of Grandpa Andrew. The man who had taught me about cars with methodical patience, who had valued order and precision, had also been a college prankster, a risk-taker, a young man with a love for speed and adventure. Olivia perched on the edge of the sofa as though prepared to flee at any moment. Only when we were seated around the dining table, plates of steaming lasagna before us, did Jason clear his throat and address the elephant in the room. Becca and I have been talking a lot about what happened with the Shelby and what it means for our family moving forward, he began. We've made some decisions we'd like to share with you. All eyes turned to me expectantly. I set down my fork, the food, untouched. First, I've decided not to pursue the police report, I said, watching relief wash over Lawrence and Emma's faces. Not because what happened wasn't serious. It was. But because I believe there might be a better path forward for all of us. Thank you, Rebecca, Lawrence said, his voice uncharacteristically humble. That's more generous than we deserve. It's not about generosity, I clarified. It's about what would actually help heal this family. But dropping the report comes with conditions. Emma glanced at her husband nervously. What kind of conditions? First, I want complete transparency about Grandpa Andrew's involvement in the Alzheimer's treatment program. I want to know everything. When it started, what it involved, why none of us were told. Lawrence nodded slowly. That's fair. It's a complicated story, but you deserve to know it all. Second, I'm planning to display the Shelby at Dr. Wilson's fundraising gala next month, and I'd like the entire family to attend, not just to support the cause, but as a public statement that we're unified in honoring Grandpa Andrew's legacy. Of course, Emma agreed quickly. We'd be honored to attend. Third, I continued, my gaze shifting to Olivia, I want us to address the pattern that led to this situation in the first place, the financial enabling, the lack of boundaries, the resentments that have built up over years. Olivia fidgeted with her napkin. You mean me? My problems? I mean all of us, I corrected. The dynamics we've all participated in, which is why my final condition is that we commit to family counseling. Not just once or twice, but regularly, for at least 6 months. Silence fell over the table. Family therapy would require vulnerability, honesty, and a willingness to change, qualities the Chen family had not historically embraced. Lawrence's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I know it's uncomfortable, Jason interjected, reaching for my hand across the table. It will be for all of us. But I think it's necessary if we want to move forward as a family, instead of just papering over the cracks until the next crisis. I'll do it, Olivia said suddenly, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in days. I need it. We all do. Emma reached for her daughter's hand. If Olivia is willing, then I am too. All eyes turned to Lawrence, the traditional patriarch whose approval had always been the family's North Star. He sat motionless for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a deep sigh that seemed to deflate his usually commanding presence, he nodded. You're right, he admitted, the words clearly difficult for him. What happened with the car? It wasn't just a mistake. It was the culmination of patterns we've allowed to become entrenched. If therapy is what it takes to repair the damage, then I'll participate. The knot of tension I'd been carrying loosened slightly. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step toward something new. Thank you, I said simply. As Jason began to serve the salad, Olivia cleared her throat. I have something I'd like to say, if that's okay? I nodded, curious despite my lingering wariness. First, I want to apologize again, not just for my role in what happened with the Shelby, but for everything leading up to it. The constant drama, the financial drain, the emotional manipulation. Olivia's voice wavered but remained steady. After you left the car club, I had a long talk with Dr. Wilson. He suggested I might benefit from a different kind of program than the retreat in Sedona. What kind of program? Jason asked. An actual, evidence-based treatment program for anxiety and depression, combined with financial counseling. Olivia reached for the gift bag she'd brought, placing it on the table. I've already had my first evaluation. The thoughtfulness of the gesture warmed me. Thank you. And thank you for agreeing to the family dinner tomorrow. I know it won't be easy. What are you planning to say to them? He asked cautiously. I served myself a portion of curry chicken before answering. I'm going to propose a deal. I'll drop the police report and agree to showcase the Shelby at Dr. Wilson's gala, but only under certain conditions. What kind of conditions? That's what I want to discuss with you tonight. I met his gaze directly. Because they involve all of us making changes, Jason, not just your parents and Olivia. He nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. You mean how I've handled the situation over the years, being caught in the middle, not setting clear boundaries, and how I've handled it too, I admitted, always playing the practical villain, keeping score, holding on to resentments. Neither approach has been particularly effective at creating a healthy family dynamic. We spent the evening outlining what we needed from the Chen family moving forward, but also what we were willing to commit to ourselves. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years about the strains my in-laws had placed on our marriage, and for the first time, I felt Jason truly hearing my concerns without immediately jumping to his family's defense. By the time we went to bed, we had a framework for tomorrow's conversation. Not perfect, but a starting point at least. As I drifted toward sleep, I found myself wondering whether Olivia would actually show up, whether Lawrence could humble himself enough to have this discussion, whether anything would really change. The next day passed in a blur of preparation. Jason left work early to clean the house while I stopped at the grocery store for ingredients. We'd decided against another takeout meal. This conversation called for something homemade, something that required care and attention. I chose to make my grandmother's lasagna recipe, a dish I'd learned as a teenager and perfected over the years. Comfort food for an uncomfortable conversation. I was layering cheese when Jason announced from the living room, "They're here." Taking a deep breath, I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel and prepared to greet my in-laws for the first time in our home since the theft. Lawrence entered first, his posture stiff, but his expression humbled in a way I'd never seen before. Emma followed, carrying a bouquet of lilies, my favorite flowers, though I couldn't recall ever telling her that. "These are for you," she said softly, extending the arrangement. A small gesture, but we wanted to bring something. "Thank you." I accepted the flowers, their fragrance momentarily grounding me. "They're beautiful." Olivia entered last, hanging back slightly, her usual bohemian flair subdued in simple jeans and a navy sweater. She carried a small gift bag that she clutched like a lifeline. "Thank you all for coming," Jason said, his voice warm but formal as he guided everyone to the living room. "Can I get anyone a drink before dinner?" As Jason handled the drinks, I returned to the kitchen to finish dinner preparations, needing a few moments to collect myself. Through the pass-through window, I could see the Chen family seated awkwardly in our living room, the conversation stilted and careful. Lawrence examined his water glass with unusual intensity. Emma smoothed non-existent wrinkles from her skirt. They looked so happy, so unaware of the challenges life would bring, his eventual battle with Alzheimer's, her early death from cancer, the family tensions that would shadow their legacy. The key felt substantial in my palm, its aged metal carrying decades of history. Back in the kitchen, coffee in hand, I pulled out Dr. Wilson's business card. His proposal about the fundraising gala tugged at my thoughts. The idea of showcasing the Shelby at an event supporting Alzheimer's research felt right somehow, a way to honor Grandpa Andrew's memory and his participation in the experimental treatment program. But it would also mean engaging with the Chen family again, navigating still raw emotions. My phone chimed with a text message from Megan, my closest friend and colleague at the architecture firm. "How did yesterday go? Car recovered? Family intact?" I sent a quick reply. "Car back. Family. Complicated. Coffee later? Your office, 10 a.m. I'll bring pastries." With a plan in place, I moved through my morning routine, careful not to wake Jason. We'd talked late into the night, processing the revelations about his grandfather's treatment program, Olivia's unexpected accountability, and the question of whether to pursue the police report. Jason had been uncharacteristically firm about supporting whatever decision I made, but I could see the relief in his eyes when I mentioned considering dropping the charges. Despite everything, these were his parents, his sister. Family ties ran deep. At work, I buried myself in blueprints and client emails until Megan arrived, bearing promised pastries and an expectant expression. "Spill," she commanded, settling into the chair across from my desk and sliding a chocolate croissant toward me. The complete saga of the stolen Shelby. I recounted the events of the past 2 days, watching Megan's expressions shift from outrage to disbelief to cautious optimism as the story unfolded. "Let me get this straight. she said when I'd finished. Your in-laws stole and sold your car to fund your sister-in-law's woo-woo retreat, but the buyer turned out to be a doctor who knew your grandfather-in-law, offered to return the car immediately, and invited you to showcase it at a charity gala. Meanwhile, your typically self-absorbed sister-in-law had an actual moment of self-awareness and returned a key and photo she'd been hiding for 3 years. That about covers it, I confirmed, breaking off a piece of croissant. That's not a family drama, Becca. That's a Lifetime movie waiting to happen. Megan shook her head in amazement. So, what are you going to do? About the police report? The gala? All of it? I sighed, leaning back in my chair. That's the million-dollar question. The lawyer in you probably thinks I should pursue charges, right? Make sure there are consequences. Megan, who'd completed law school before switching to architecture, considered the question seriously. The lawyer in me recognizes that a crime was committed, yes. But the friend in me knows it's more complicated than that. They're your family. And it sounds like there might be a path toward actual change and healing here. That's what I keep coming back to. If Olivia is genuinely taking responsibility for once, if this could be a turning point for how the Chen family functions, I trailed off uncertain. Then maybe legal consequences aren't the most constructive approach, Megan finished for me. But you'd need assurances that boundaries will be respected moving forward, and probably some serious family therapy. I laughed despite myself. Can you imagine Lawrence Chen in therapy? The man thinks showing any vulnerability is a moral failing. People can surprise you, Megan pointed out. Your sister-in-law already has. The observation lingered with me throughout the day, through client meetings and design consultations. People can surprise you. Olivia certainly had. Was it possible that her moment of clarity represented a genuine turning point? And if so, what responsibility did I have to nurture that potential growth rather than shut it down? By late afternoon, I'd made a decision, or at least the outline of one. I texted Jason to let him know I'd be home around 6 and asked if he'd be willing to invite his parents and Olivia for dinner the following evening. His response was immediate. Really? Are you sure? No, I replied honestly. But it's a necessary step, and I need you to back me up whatever happens. Always, came his response, followed by, I'll make the calls. When I arrived home, Jason was waiting in the kitchen, the island countertop covered with takeout containers from our favorite Thai restaurant. I figured you wouldn't want to cook tonight, he explained, unpacking spring rolls and pad thai. Not with everything going on. With hands that had begun to tremble slightly, I opened the smaller envelope. Inside was a vintage key on a tarnished silver keychain, engraved with the Shelby Cobra emblem. Attached to the keychain was a small, weathered photograph. Grandpa. Andrew standing proudly beside his brand-new Shelby in 1967, his arm around a young woman I recognized as his wife, Catherine, who had died long before I joined the family. It's the original key, I whispered, tears blurring my vision. And the photo from when he first bought the car. Jason reached out, touching the photograph reverently. I've never seen this picture of Grandpa and Grandma together. Mom always said there weren't many photos left from that time. I turned the key over in my palm, feeling its weight. Not just the physical heft of metal, but the emotional significance of what it represented. A final gift from Grandpa Andrew, withheld by Olivia's jealousy, but finally delivered when her conscience could no longer bear its burden. She kept this from you for 3 years, Jason said, his tone unreadable, and then returned it when she realized how far things had gone. I tucked the key and photo carefully back into the envelope. People are complicated, Jason. Even Olivia. We sat in silence for a long moment, the implications of the day's revelations settling around us like dust after an earthquake. Everything had shifted. My relationship with my in-laws, my understanding of Olivia, even my connection to Grandpa Andrew's memory had acquired new dimensions. What are you thinking? Jason finally asked, his voice gentle. I looked out the window to where the Shelby sat in our driveway, its presence both a comfort and a reminder of how quickly what we value can be taken. I'm thinking about legacy, I said slowly. About what we leave behind and why. Grandpa Andrew left me that car because we shared something special. He participated in an experimental treatment program, possibly knowing it wouldn't save him, because he wanted to contribute to something bigger than himself. And now Dr. Wilson wants to use the Shelby to help raise funds for Alzheimer's research. I turned back to Jason. Maybe there's a way forward that honors all of that. You're considering the gala, then? I'm considering a lot of things. I picked up the teacup, drawing comfort from its warmth between my palms. Including what it means to truly forgive. Jason reached across the table, covering my hand with his. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Not split down the middle, not caught between loyalties. With you. For the first time since discovering the empty garage, I felt the constriction in my chest begin to truly ease. The path forward wasn't yet clear, but at least I knew I wouldn't be walking it alone. What I couldn't have known then was that Olivia's unexpected moment of accountability wasn't a temporary aberration, but the beginning of a transformation that would reshape our entire family dynamic. And that the Shelby, my beloved connection, to Grandpa Andrew, would become the catalyst for healing rifts I had thought were beyond repair. The morning after retrieving the Shelby, I woke early, my mind still processing the whirlwind of emotions and revelations from the previous day. Jason slept soundly beside me, his breathing deep and even in the gray dawn light filtering through our curtains. I slipped quietly from bed, pulled on a robe, and padded downstairs to the kitchen. As coffee brewed, I found myself drawn to the garage, opening the connecting door with a sense of reassurance I hadn't expected to feel so strongly. There it sat in the weak morning light, the Highland Green Shelby, exactly where it belonged. I ran my hand along its flank, the cool metal grounding me in reality. Yesterday hadn't been a dream. The car was back, and with it, complications I was still trying to untangle. I retrieved the original key and photograph from where I'd placed them on my workbench, studying the image of young Andrew Chen and his wife. You got it back, he said, the word somewhere between a statement and a question. I did, I confirmed, patting the hood affectionately. No thanks to your family. He winced, but didn't argue the point. What happened? Dad texted that everything was resolved, but wouldn't elaborate. I walked past him into the house, dropping my keys on the entryway table with deliberate casualness. Dr. Wilson turned out to be surprisingly decent. He returned the car as soon as he saw the documentation proving it was legally mine. He's actually a neurologist who worked with your grandfather during his Alzheimer's treatment. Wait, what? Jason followed me into the kitchen, confusion evident. Grandpa was in some kind of treatment program? Apparently. I filled the electric kettle, craving the comfort of tea after the emotional marathon of the day. Your father never thought to mention that to us, just like he never bothered to check who actually owned the Shelby before selling it out from under me. Jason ran a hand through his hair. I know they messed up, Becca, but don't. I turned to face him, kettle forgotten. Don't defend them right now, Jason. Not after what they did. I wasn't going to, he said, his voice dropping. I was going to ask if you're pressing charges. The question hung between us, heavy with implications. Filing charges would create a permanent rift in the family, possibly estranging Jason from his parents. Not filing charges might suggest that what they did was somehow forgivable, setting a precedent for future boundary violations. I haven't decided, I answered honestly. There's more to consider now. What do you mean? I recounted the conversation at the car club, Dr. Wilson's request about the gala, and more surprisingly, Olivia's unexpected moment of clarity and accountability. Olivia said that? Jason looked genuinely shocked. That doesn't sound like her at all. I know. It threw me completely. I resumed making tea, the familiar ritual helping to order my thoughts. She also gave me this. I retrieved the envelope from my portfolio, turning it over in my hands. Said I should open it when I'm alone. Jason eyed the envelope warily. That's cryptic. Your sister has always had a flair for the dramatic. Despite everything, a small smile tugged at my lips. But this felt different. She seemed different. Do you want me to leave so you can open it? I considered the question, weighing our strained connection against 12 years of partnership. No, I decided. Stay. Whatever this is, we should face it together. With careful movements, I broke the seal and opened the envelope. Inside was a folded letter and another, smaller envelope that felt stiff, as though it contained something more substantial than paper. I removed the letter. First, unfolding a single sheet covered in Olivia's distinctive flowing handwriting. Dear Becca, I read aloud. By the time you read this, I'll be in Sedona, starting another journey that we both know won't fix what's really broken in me. But before I go, there's something I need to return to you. Something I've kept for selfish reasons for far too long. I paused, glancing at Jason, who looked as mystified as I felt. The day Grandpa Andrew died, I continued reading. I was alone with him for about 20 minutes before the rest of the family arrived at the hospice center. He was lucid, one of those brief windows of clarity that sometimes happens near the end. He gave me this and made me promise to give it to you. But I was jealous. Jealous of the bond you shared with him. Jealous of how he trusted you with his precious car when he barely remembered my name half the time. So I kept it, telling myself I'd give it to you eventually. 3 years later, I still haven't found the courage. But watching what my self-absorption has driven my parents to do makes me realize it's time to finally honor his wishes. I'm sorry. Becca, not just for this, but for everything. Maybe someday I'll find the strength to tell you in person. Olivia. Adults who have never said no to me, Olivia countered, even when you should have. The dynamic unfolding before me was so unexpected, I hardly knew how to respond. For years, the family pattern had been set. Olivia needed, the Chen parents provided, Jason mediated, and I was the pragmatic outsider suggesting responsible alternatives that no one wanted to hear. Now somehow, the pattern was fracturing before my eyes. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Dr. Wilson's assistant informed us that the Shelby had been brought around to the front entrance, with all paperwork updated to reflect the voided sale. Reality reasserted itself, grounding us back in the practical aftermath of the situation. I need time to think, I said, rising from my chair and gathering my documents. About the police report, about the gala, about everything. Of course, Lawrence nodded, his usual authoritative demeanor subdued. We understand. As I moved toward the door, Olivia stepped into my path. Becca, wait, there's something else. She reached into her purse and extracted an envelope, holding it out to me with trembling fingers. I was going to mail this to you after I left for Sedona, but since that's not happening now... Cautiously, I accepted the envelope. What is this? Open it when you're alone, she said softly. It's something I should have given you a long time ago. The weight of the envelope felt disproportionate to its size, as though it contained more than just paper. I slipped it into my portfolio without further comment, nodded a stiff farewell to my in-laws, and followed the assistant down to the front entrance. And there it was, my Highland Green Shelby, gleaming in the midday sun, appearing completely unharmed by its brief detour. The sight of it loosened something in my chest, a knot of anxiety I'd been carrying since opening that empty garage door. Dr. Wilson stood beside it, key extended toward me. She's a remarkable vehicle, he said as I approached. Your grandfather had exquisite taste and clearly maintained it meticulously. We maintained it together, I corrected gently, accepting the key. It was our project. He smiled, understanding in his eyes. Those shared projects are often where the deepest connections form. My father and I restored a '57 Thunderbird when I was in high school. Those memories sustained me through his own battle with cancer years later. I'm sorry about your father, I said, feeling a kinship with this stranger I hadn't anticipated. Life and loss are intertwined, he replied philosophically, but what we build together remains. Think about the gala, Ms. Mitchell. Not for me, but for the legacy of what you and Andrew created together. As he walked away, I ran my hand along the Shelby's flank, reconnecting with its solid presence. The metal was warm from the sun, the familiar curves precisely as they should be. I slid into the driver's seat, inhaling the scent of aged leather, and the faint trace of the Old Spice aftershave Grandpa Andrew had always worn. Against all odds, it felt like coming home. The drive back to my house was therapeutic, the Shelby's powerful engine rumbling beneath me, the stick shift solid in my palm as I navigated through Portland's afternoon traffic. With each mile, the anxiety and betrayal of the past 24 hours began to recede, replaced by questions about what would happen next. The confrontation at the car club had resolved one crisis, but opened up several others. Jason was waiting on the front porch when I pulled into our driveway, leaping to his feet as the distinctive sound of the Shelby's engine announced my arrival. His face was a study in relief and apprehension as I parked and exited the car. He did? Yes. He mentioned a young woman who understood the soul of his Shelby. Not just the mechanics, he said, but the heart of the machine. I believe his exact words were, "Some people see cars as objects, but she sees them as stories, with engines." Tears pricked at my eyes as the words resonated with a conversation I'd had with Grandpa Andrew years ago, one of our last lucid exchanges before the disease stole him away completely. I'd forgotten that specific phrasing until this moment, hearing it echoed back to me by a stranger. "Thank you for telling me that," I managed, my voice thick with emotion. Dr. Wilson nodded, a gesture somehow both professional and compassionate. "I'll have the car brought around whenever you're ready, and here's my card, for when you've decided about the gala." As he excused himself to make arrangements for the car's return, an uncomfortable silence descended upon the remaining four of us. Lawrence cleared his throat several times, clearly searching for words, while Emma examined her wedding ring with unusual intensity. Olivia continued her study of the table grain, her fingers fidgeting with the pendant around her neck, a nervous habit since childhood. "I suppose we should discuss what happens now," Lawrence finally said. "What happens," I replied evenly, "is that I take my car home. Beyond that, I haven't decided." "The police report," Emma ventured cautiously. "Will you proceed with pressing charges?" Before I could answer, Olivia's head snapped up. "She should," she said, her voice strained but determined. "You committed a crime and I was complicit. We should face the consequences." I stared at my sister-in-law, momentarily speechless. In all the years I'd known her, I'd never heard Olivia acknowledge responsibility for anything that went sideways in her life. Everything was always someone else's fault, or the universe conspiring against her, or Mercury in retrograde. "This isn't helping, Olivia," Emma sighed. "No, Mom. What wasn't helping was selling Becca's car because I convinced you. I needed to go to Sedona to realign my energy or whatever nonsense I was spouting." Olivia's voice rose slightly, color flooding her cheeks. "I've been running from one quick fix to another for years, and you and Dad have been my enablers. And now you've broken the law and risked your reputation to fund another of my escapes." The raw honesty of her statement hung in the air between us. Lawrence reached for his daughter's hand. "We only wanted to help you heal, Livy." "But that's just it, Dad. I'm not healing. I'm running, and I'm dragging all of you down with me." Olivia turned to face me directly. "Becca, I'm sorry. Not just about the car, but for everything." The way I've taken advantage of this family's love. The way I've made you the villain for trying to set reasonable boundaries. I've been selfish and entitled and I understand if you want to press charges. It was perhaps the most surprising moment in a day already filled with revelations. I studied Olivia's face, searching for the manipulation I'd grown accustomed to detecting in her apologies. But all I saw was exhaustion, shame, and something I'd never witnessed in her before: clarity. "Why the sudden insight?" I asked, not unkindly but warily. Olivia's laugh held no humor. "Nothing like watching your parents commit grand theft auto to make you reevaluate your life choices." She twisted the pendant between her fingers. "But, honestly, it's been coming for a while. Each new solution works for less and less time. Each retreat leaves me more empty when I return. And yesterday, when Dad called to tell me what they'd done for me, I felt sick. Actually, physically, sick at what I'd driven them to." "We made our own choice," Emma interjected. "We're adults, Olivia." "There's a lot you don't know, Olivia, because you've been too busy chasing the next quick fix to pay attention to the family you claim needs to support you." "That's not fair," Emma interjected. "Isn't it?" I challenged. "When was the last time any of you asked about my memories with Grandpa Andrew? When was the last time you showed any respect for what that car means to me, beyond its dollar value?" The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken truths. Dr. Wilson placed the documents carefully back on the table. "I believe I understand the situation now. Ms. Mitchell, the car is rightfully yours. I'll return it immediately." Relief washed over me so powerfully I had to grip the edge of the table. "Thank you. However," he continued, "I would like to make an alternative proposal if you're willing to hear it." My guard instantly rose again. "What kind of proposal?" "I'm a neurologist specializing in degenerative brain disorders, including Alzheimer's disease. I purchased the Shelby not just because I'm a collector, but because of its connection to Andrew Chen." I stared at him, confusion replacing caution. "You knew my grandfather?" "Not personally, but his case was notable in our field." Dr. Wilson glanced at Lawrence, who nodded slightly. "Andrew Chen participated in an experimental treatment program at our research facility 5 years ago. While the therapy couldn't reverse his condition, he exhibited unusual periods of clarity that helped advance our understanding of cognitive recall patterns in Alzheimer's patients." My mind reeled with this new information. I didn't know. He was part of a study." Lawrence looked down at his hands. Dad didn't want anyone to know. He was a proud man. The treatments were in the early phases then, promising but ultimately not effective enough to halt the progression of his disease. "Our research has advanced significantly since then," Dr. Wilson added, "but we always remember our early participants." When I heard through collector channels that Andrew Chen's Shelby might be available, I was interested not just as an enthusiast, but as a researcher who respected Mr. Chen's contribution to our work. "But why didn't you just reach out directly?" I asked, still struggling to process this revelation. Dr. Wilson's gaze shifted to Lawrence and Emma. "I was told the family was handling the sale collectively. I had no reason to question that assertion." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Because they conveniently left me out of the equation." "Becca," Lawrence began, "we truly thought—" "Save it," I cut him off. "I'm tired of excuses." I turned back to Dr. Wilson. "You mentioned an alternative proposal?" He nodded, reaching into his briefcase to extract a folder. "Our research institute is hosting a fundraising gala next month to support our Alzheimer's research program. We display significant vehicles owned by families affected by the disease, a visual reminder of the memories and connections Alzheimer's threatens. I would be honored if you would consider displaying Andrew's Shelby at the event." The request caught me off guard. "You want to borrow the car for a charity event?" "Yes, and perhaps you might consider sharing your story of how the Shelby became a point of connection between you and your grandfather-in-law during his illness." These personal narratives help us humanize the disease for potential donors. I sat back, considering his request. The car would remain in my possession? Absolutely. We would arrange for secure transportation to and from the venue, comprehensive, insurance coverage during the event, and of course, acknowledge your generous contribution. From the corner of my eye, I could see Lawrence and Emma exchanging glances, clearly as surprised by this turn of events as I was. Olivia remained silent, her gaze fixed on the tabletop. I'd need to think about it, I said finally. Dr. Wilson smiled, the expression warming his clinical demeanor. Of course. There's no pressure, and regardless of your decision, the car will be returned to you today. It's currently in the club's secure garage downstairs. The tension that had been coiled in my chest for the past 24 hours began to unwind. My car was here, safe, and would be coming home with me. As Dr. Wilson gathered his papers, he paused, studying me with a thoughtful expression. You know, Ms. Mitchell, your grandfather-in-law spoke about you during his moments of clarity in our program. My heart stuttered. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away, a flush creeping up her neck. Becca, Lawrence began, his voice formal and strained. This is Dr. Matthew Wilson. He's agreed to hear us out regarding the situation. I ignored my in-laws, focusing instead on the stranger who now technically owned my car. Dr. Wilson, I said, extending my hand, thank you for meeting with me. His handshake was firm, his gaze direct. Mrs. Chen, or do you prefer Mitchell? Mitchell is fine. I gestured to the chairs arranged around a polished oak table. Shall we sit? As we arranged ourselves around the table, I noted that Olivia chose a seat at the far end, physically distancing herself from the confrontation. Typical. Always in the middle of chaos but never willing to face its consequences. I understand there's been a significant misunderstanding about the vehicle I purchased yesterday, Dr. Wilson began, his tone measured and professional. Not a misunderstanding, I corrected. A theft. The 1967 Shelby GT500 was legally mine, left to me by Andrew Chen, Lawrence's father and my grandfather-in-law. The title is in my name. My in-laws had no legal right to sell it to you. Lawrence shifted uncomfortably. As I explained to Dr. Wilson, we believed the car was still in my father's name. He had mentioned leaving it to you, but we thought— You thought wrong, I interrupted, opening my portfolio to remove the documentation I'd gathered overnight. Here's the vehicle title with my name, dated 3 weeks before Grandpa Andrew passed away. Here's his notarized letter stating his intention that the car remain with me. And here, I slid across a final document, is the police report I filed this morning for Grand Theft Auto. Emma gasped. You said you'd wait. I said I wanted the car or the buyer's information by morning. You provided the latter, so I proceeded. Accordingly, I turned back to Dr. Wilson. I'm not here to cause trouble for you, doctor. You're as much a victim in this as I am. But that car represents more than just its monetary value to me, and I'm prepared to take this as far as necessary to get it back. Dr. Wilson studied the documents with methodical care, his expression revealing nothing. After a long moment, he removed his glasses, polishing them with a handkerchief. A move that reminded me so strongly of my grandfather that my throat tightened. The title is indeed in your name, Ms. Mitchell, he confirmed, which legally makes the sale invalid. He turned to Lawrence and Emma. You assured me you had the right to sell this vehicle. Lawrence's face flushed dark with shame. We genuinely believed we did. My father was not always clear in his final months. We thought the paperwork hadn't been completed. A simple check of the title would have confirmed ownership, I pointed out, unable to keep the edge from my voice. That's quite enough, Rebecca, Emma snapped, her composure finally cracking. We've admitted our mistake. There's no need to humiliate us further. I think selling someone's property without permission goes a bit beyond a mistake. I replied, ice in my voice. And let's be honest about why you did it. To fund another of Olivia's self-improvement schemes. How many is this now? The yoga instructor certification she never completed? The organic skincare line that never launched? The life-changing trip to Bali that somehow didn't change anything? From the corner of my eye, I saw Olivia flinch. Dr. Wilson cleared his throat. If I may interject, while the legal situation is clear, I'd like to understand the personal elements at play. Here, this car seems to hold significant emotional value beyond its considerable market worth. I took a steadying breath. My grandfather, Andrew Chen, taught me everything I know about cars. When I married Jason, Grandpa Andrew took me under his wing. He'd lost his wife decades earlier, and his son, I nodded toward Lawrence, had no interest in automobiles. But I did. The Shelby became our project, our connection. When his Alzheimer's was diagnosed, working on that car with me was one of the few things that still brought him clarity and joy. To my surprise, it was Olivia who spoke next, her voice uncharacteristically small. I didn't know that part, about Grandpa finding joy in the car with you near the end. I looked at her directly for the first time. Becca, I'm so sorry. I had no idea they were planning this. Didn't you? The question hung between us. You knew they had issues with the car being mine. You knew Olivia was asking for money again. You never thought these things might collide? Jason looked stricken. Of course not. I would never have let them. But you did let them, Jason, by not setting boundaries with your family for all these years, by making me the practical villain while everyone enables Olivia. The dam had broken, years of careful diplomacy washed away by this ultimate betrayal. They think they can just take what's mine because it should have been kept in the Chen family. What did they say about getting it back? I pulled out my phone. I told them I want the car back or the buyer's information by morning, or I'm going to the police. Jason blanched. You'd report my parents? They stole my car, Jason. My inheritance. The last piece of my grandfather I had. But filing charges, that would destroy the family. I looked at my husband of 12 years, this man I loved but who sometimes seemed to exist in a different reality than I did. The family is already fractured if they think this was acceptable. And they did it for Olivia. Again. Olivia's struggling. Olivia has been struggling for years. At what point does she take responsibility for her own life instead of vampiring resources from everyone around her? Before Jason could respond, my phone rang. Lawrence's number. I put it on speaker. Rebecca. His voice was subdued. We've spoken to the buyer, explained the situation. He's willing to meet with you tomorrow. He hasn't registered the car yet. Relief washed over me so strongly my knees nearly buckled. Where and when? The Riverfront Classic Car Club. Noon. His name is Dr. Matthew Wilson. I'll be there, I said, ending the call before emotion overtook me. Jason reached for me again, and this time I let him hold me while tears of anger, relief, and lingering. Betrayal soaked his shirt. But even as I accepted his comfort, I knew something fundamental had shifted in our marriage. A trust had been broken, and I wasn't sure yet how, or if, it could be repaired. What I didn't know then was that this meeting would lead to revelations none of us were prepared for, and that the true story of my grandfather's Shelby was more complex and healing than any retreat in Sedona could ever be. I barely slept that night, tossing and turning while Jason snored beside me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my grandfather's weathered hands on the Shelby's steering wheel, heard his gentle laugh as he taught me to double clutch on deserted country roads. The betrayal felt like an open wound, made worse by the knowledge that my husband didn't fully understand why I was so devastated. Morning came with aching eyes and a resolve like steel. I dressed with deliberate care, my charcoal pencil skirt, and emerald blouse that brought out the green in my eyes. Professional armor for what promised to be a difficult encounter. Jason offered to come with me, but I declined. This was something I needed to handle alone, without his divided loyalties complicating an already fraught situation. "I'll call you when it's done," I promised, leaving him looking lost in our kitchen, a half-empty coffee mug clutched in his hand. The Riverfront Classic Car Club was housed in a renovated warehouse overlooking the Willamette River, its brick exterior maintaining industrial charm while the interior gleamed with polished wood floors and vintage automotive memorabilia. A kingdom of mechanical nostalgia where enthusiasts gathered to share their passion. On any other day, I would have felt at home here. I arrived 20 minutes early, my nerves too frayed to sit at home counting seconds. The receptionist directed me to a private meeting room that overlooked the club's showcase floor, where members' prized vehicles were displayed in rotating exhibitions. Through the glass wall, I could see a dozen immaculate classics: a midnight blue Jaguar E-Type, a flame-red Ferrari Dino, a pearl-white Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing, their paintwork gleaming under carefully positioned spotlights. But not my Shelby. Not yet. At precisely noon, the door opened. Lawrence entered first, his normally confident stride diminished, shoulders hunched beneath his camel overcoat. Emma followed, her face a mask of carefully controlled neutrality. Behind them came a man I didn't recognize, tall and distinguished, with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Dr. Matthew Wilson, presumably, the buyer of my stolen heritage. What I didn't expect was the fourth person who slipped in behind them, Olivia, her typical bohemian flair subdued in a simple black dress, her expression uncharacteristically somber. "Why didn't you call me the moment you found out?" My voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. Jason looked miserable. "I thought I could fix it. I thought I could talk them out of it before you even knew it was gone. But they're not answering." Now, and Olivia's phone is going straight to voicemail. I grabbed my keys. "I'm going over there now." "Becca, wait!" But I was already back in my car, fury propelling me across Portland toward the Chen family home. The drive was a blur, my mind cycling through disbelief, rage, and crushing grief. That car wasn't just metal and mechanics. It represented afternoons in my grandfather's garage, his patient voice explaining how internal combustion engines worked, his gnarled hands guiding mine on the stick shift. It was the place where, in his final moments of clarity, he'd told me how proud he was of the woman I'd become. And now it was gone, sacrificed to Olivia's latest whim. I pulled up to the tidy bungalow with its perfectly maintained garden and warm golden light spilling from the windows, a domestic tableau that now struck me as a facade. I pounded on the front door, propriety abandoned. Emma opened it, her expression shifting from welcome to wariness when she saw my face. "Where is it?" I demanded, stepping past her into the hallway. "Where's my car?" Lawrence appeared from the living room, his posture stiff. "Rebecca, I think you need to calm down." "Don't tell me to calm down. You stole my car and sold it out from under me. For what? So Olivia can go play with crystals. In the desert?" "That's not fair," Emma interjected. "Your sister-in-law has been struggling, and that gives you the right to sell something that doesn't belong to you? Something that can never be replaced?" My voice cracked, betraying the hurt beneath the anger. Lawrence's jaw tightened. That car was my father's prized possession. It should have stayed in the Chen family. And there it was, the real issue, finally spoken aloud after years of simmering resentment. "Your father gave it to me," I said quietly. "He made that choice. Not because I'm not a Chen by blood, but because we shared something you never bothered to understand." "What we understand," Lawrence replied stiffly, "is that our daughter needs help, and that car was sitting in your garage being of use to no one." I stared at them, these people who had welcomed me into their family 15 years ago, who had attended our wedding with tears of joy, who had always treated me kindly, until their daughter's needs collided with mine. "Who did you sell it to?" I asked, my voice hollow. A private collector, Lawrence answered. The transaction is complete, Rebecca. I'm sorry if this upsets you, but what's done is done. You had no right, I whispered. No legal right. That car was in my name. A flicker of unease crossed Lawrence's face. The title was in my father's name. He told me he was leaving it to you, but the paperwork was completed 2 weeks before he died, I finished. We went to the DMV together. The title is in my name, not his. What you did wasn't just morally wrong. It was illegal. Uncertainty replaced Lawrence's righteous indignation. That's not possible. My father never mentioned... Because he knew how you'd react, I said. He knew you thought that car should go to you or Jason, not to me. Emma placed a restraining hand on Lawrence's arm. If what you're saying is true, why didn't you stop? This? You must have known we had the spare key. Because I trusted my family, I said simply. I never imagined you'd do something like this. The weight of what they'd done seemed to finally settle on Lawrence's shoulders. He sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his 70 years. The buyer, I pressed. I need his information. Now. Rebecca? He paid cash. If we try to unwind this, then you'll refund him yourselves, I cut in. Because if I don't have my car back, or the name of the person who bought it, by tomorrow morning, I'm filing a police report for grand theft auto. The silence that followed was deafening. You wouldn't, Emma whispered. I met her gaze steadily. Try me. I left them with that ultimatum hanging in the air, my hands shaking as I drove home. Jason was waiting in the kitchen, his face drawn, with worry. What happened? He asked, attempting to embrace me. I stepped away, not ready for comfort. They sold it, to fund Olivia's retreat and pay off some debts she has. I reached across the table. Emma, I say this with love. Sometimes supporting someone means helping them build capabilities, not just writing checks. Emma patted my hand, but her eyes had that distant look they got when she'd stopped truly listening. You've always been the practical one, Becca. It's why you and Jason work so well. You balance each other. But Olivia needs a different kind of support right now. I recognized a diplomatic dismissal when I heard one. We finished lunch talking about safer topics. Jason's upcoming work presentation, Emma's community garden, an upcoming family dinner. As I was leaving, Lawrence arrived home, giving me a warm, if slightly reserved hug. Been showing off the Shelby to the neighbors again? He asked, his tone light, but with that undercurrent that had been present since his father had left me the car instead of him? Just regular maintenance, I replied. You know how particular your dad was about that car. Indeed, Lawrence said, his expression unreadable. He always did make unusual choices about who should be caring for his prized possessions. The comment stung, as it was meant to. I said my goodbyes and drove back to work, pushing away the familiar discomfort that always lingered after these subtle reminders that I would always be, in some small way, an outsider in the Chen family dynamics. What I didn't know then was that Lawrence and Emma had already made their decision, one that would shake our family to its foundation and test the boundaries of forgiveness in ways I couldn't imagine. 3 days later, I pulled into our driveway after a grueling day managing architectural projects that seemed determined to go over budget. The house lights were on, which meant Jason was home early, a small mercy after the day I'd had. All I wanted was a glass of wine, a hot bath, and maybe 30 minutes in the garage with my Shelby, the ritual of checking its systems always soothing my frayed nerves. As I unlocked the side door that led directly to the garage, I was already mentally planning which maintenance task I'd tackle tonight. Maybe I'd check the tire pressure or test the battery, simple tasks that required just enough focus to drive away workplace stress without demanding too much from my exhausted brain. I flipped on the light switch. The space where the Shelby should have been was empty. For a moment, I simply stared, my brain refusing to process the absence. Had Jason moved it? No, he never touched the car without asking. Had there been a break-in? But there were no signs of forced entry, and nothing else seemed disturbed. "Jason!" I called out, my voice echoing in the too-empty garage. "Jason!" I heard rapid footsteps, then the door from the house swung open. Jason stood there, phone in hand, his expression a mixture of guilt and apprehension. "Where's the car?" I demanded, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. Jason's face confirmed my worst fears before he even spoke. "Becca, I need you to stay calm. Where is my car?" Each word came out like ice. "My parents took it," he said, the words tumbling out. "Dad came by while you were at that site visit in Vancouver. He had the spare key, the one we gave them for emergencies." The room seemed to tilt. They took my grandfather's car? Without asking? Why would they? And then it hit me with sickening clarity. Olivia. They took it for Olivia, didn't they? Jason ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit since college. "The retreat in Sedona. Dad said they found a buyer for the Shelby. Some collector offered them $25,000 cash. They're giving most of it to Olivia for the retreat and some other debts." 25,000? The laugh that escaped me was bitter. "Jason, that car is worth twice that easily. And it doesn't matter because it's not theirs to sell. It was my grandfather's. He left it to me." I know, I told them that. I've been calling them all afternoon." "When? When did they take it?" My mind was racing, calculating how far they could have gotten, whether the transaction was complete. "This morning around 10. Dad said the buyer was meeting them at 2. 4 hours ago. The sale would be done. My grandfather's car, the one he'd taught me to drive in, the one we'd restored together during the summers of my teenage years, the physical embodiment of my last connection to him, was gone." In the weeks that followed, we gathered regularly to plan the journey, poring over Grandpa Andrew's map and researching the cryptic annotations that would guide our route. Family therapy continued, sometimes difficult, but increasingly productive, as we developed new ways of communicating and setting boundaries. Olivia progressed in her treatment program. Lawrence shared more memories of his mother that he'd kept private for decades, and Emma found her voice in family discussions after years of defaulting to the mediator role. The morning we set out, Lawrence and Emma in their comfortable SUV that would follow the Shelby, Olivia, Jason, and I taking turns driving the vintage muscle car, Dr. Wilson came to see us off, bringing a final surprise, a journal Catherine had kept during the brief beginning of their interrupted journey, found among Andrew's papers after his death. "One last piece of the puzzle," he said, handing it to me. "Something to guide you as you follow in their tire tracks." As we pulled out of Portland, the Shelby's engine rumbling with eager power beneath us, I felt Grandpa Andrew's presence almost tangibly. The car that had nearly torn the family apart was now literally and figuratively carrying us forward together, a journey of both restoration and discovery stretching out before us. The first destination on our map was a vista point in the Cascade Mountains marked as Catherine's View. Reportedly, the spot where young Catherine Chen had declared it the most beautiful sight she'd ever seen. As we wound up mountain roads, the Shelby handling the curves with the same confidence it had displayed for over 50 years, I reflected on the unexpected path that had led us here. A theft that led to reconciliation, a car that became a catalyst for change, a family fractured and now cautiously reforming around a shared purpose. And through it all, the guiding hand of a man who, even facing the erasure of his own memories, had found a way to create new ones for those he left behind. Behind us, Lawrence and Emma followed in their SUV, while beside me, Jason navigated and Olivia documented our journey with her camera. Ahead lay 2 weeks of discovery, prompted by clues laid down half a century ago by a couple whose adventure had been postponed but never forgotten. As we crested the final curve before Catherine's View, the vista opened before us, a breathtaking panorama of snow-capped peaks, verdant forests, and the distant shimmer of a mountain lake catching the morning sun. I pulled the Shelby to a stop at the designated viewpoint, and we all exited our vehicles in silent appreciation of the spectacular landscape. "I can see why Grandma Catherine loved this spot," Olivia said softly, capturing the view with her camera. Lawrence stood at the guardrail, emotion evident in his usually stoic features. "I never knew Mom liked places like this." Dad rarely talked about their early years together. "Maybe that's part of why we're here," I suggested. "Not just to complete their journey, but to rediscover pieces of them and ourselves along the way." As we stood together, the Highland Green Shelby gleaming in the mountain sunlight behind us, I felt a sense of rightness that transcended the pain and conflict of recent months. Grandpa Andrew's final gift hadn't been just a car or even a journey, but a chance for healing, for connection, for transformation. The road ahead would have its challenges, just as our family relationships would continue to require work and conscious effort. But standing there at Catherine's View, surrounded by the Chen family that had become my own, I knew we had already begun the most important journey, the one that would lead us from broken trust to something stronger, more resilient, and ultimately more meaningful than what had come before. And the Shelby, once a point of division, had become our vehicle for getting there, literally and figuratively carrying us forward into a future Grandpa Andrew had somehow envisioned even as his own. Memories faded away. We still had miles to go, mysteries to unravel, and family dynamics to navigate. But in that moment, watching the sun glint off the Shelby's Highland Green finish, I felt certain that the journey ahead would be worth every challenging mile. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.